Check your cupboard, sir. Maid's toddler reveals hidden secret in billionaire's mansion. The room was full of millionaires, but the person who changed everyone's heart was a tiny little girl. Nobody in that mansion expected a 3-year-old to be the reason grown men would cry before midnight. She wasn't invited. She wasn't dressed like the other children. She was simply the maid's daughter, hiding behind a curtain, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. But that night, in a house filled with diamonds and cold smiles, this tiny girl would say 4 words that made a 34-year-old billionaire's blood run cold. 4 words. That's all it took. Check your cupboard, sir. Nobody understood what she meant. Not the guests, not the staff, not even her own mother. But the billionaire understood. And when he understood, his face turned pale. His hands started shaking, and the entire room fell into silence. What was hidden in that cupboard would expose a secret someone had buried for years. And it was about to come out because of a toddler nobody thought mattered. Hey, welcome back. Before we dive into tonight's story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If stories like this move you, make sure you're subscribed because we post emotional stories just like this every single week. And trust me, stay till the very end tonight, because the final twist in this one is going to leave you speechless. Hey, let's begin. The chandeliers hadn't even finished glowing when the first champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. Nobody noticed. In the Whitmore mansion, broken glass was just background noise. Money muffled everything. Mistakes, arguments, even guilt. Ethan Whitmore stood near the window with a drink he hadn't touched, watching 200 guests laugh at jokes that weren't funny. At 34, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. Tech empire. Real estate. A name people whispered with envy. But behind his composed face was a man who hadn't slept properly in 3 years. Not since his wife died. Not since the accident everyone still talked about in careful, hushed tones. An accident the police had closed as unfortunate, far too quickly for Ethan's liking. He had never said it out loud. Not to his lawyers. Not to his family. But somewhere deep in his chest, a quiet voice kept whispering, something about that night doesn't add up. Tonight was supposed to be a distraction. Charity gala. Powerful people, expensive suits, forced smiles. In the kitchen wing, far from the golden lights of the ballroom, a woman named Marisol Reyes wiped sweat from her forehead as she plated the last tray of hors d'oeuvres. She had worked in this house for 2 years. Quiet, careful, invisible, exactly the way household staff were expected to be in homes like this. Beside her, tucked into a laundry basket lined with a soft blanket, sat her 3-year-old daughter Sophia. Sophia wasn't supposed to be there. Children weren't allowed anywhere near events like this. But Marisol's babysitter had cancelled last minute, and leaving a 3-year-old alone at home was not an option any mother would choose. Stay right here, mi amor, Marisol whispered, kissing Sophia's forehead. Don't make a sound, okay? Mama will be right back. Sophia nodded solemnly, hugging her one-eared stuffed rabbit tighter. She was a quiet child. Too quiet sometimes for a toddler. She rarely cried. She rarely demanded attention. She simply watched, with wide, dark eyes that seemed to notice everything adults assumed children couldn't understand. And there was something else about Sophia that made the household staff quietly uneasy, though none of them said it aloud. She talked about things she shouldn't know. 2 weeks ago, she'd pointed at a photograph of Ethan's late wife on the hallway wall and said, "She's cold. She wants her ring." The staff had laughed it off as toddler nonsense. Children say strange things. But Marisol hadn't laughed. She had felt a chill crawl up her spine, because Sophia had said those exact words the week before the wife's memorial service, when nobody had even mentioned a missing ring. Marisol never told anyone. Poor mothers don't get to voice suspicions in rich men's houses. They get replaced. Back in the ballroom, the string quartet shifted into something slower, more elegant. Guests swirled in silk and diamonds, laughing about stock portfolios and vacation homes. Among them stood Camille Otero, Ethan's fiancée, poised, radiant, and calculating in a way that only the household staff seemed to notice. She smiled at everyone, complimented everyone, and touched Ethan's arm with practiced tenderness whenever cameras were near. "You look tense, darling," she said, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Try to relax tonight. This is supposed to be a celebration." Ethan forced a smile. "It's hard to celebrate in a house full of ghosts." Camille's smile flickered, just for a second, before returning perfectly intact. "The past is the past, Ethan. Some things are better left buried." He didn't notice the strange emphasis on the word buried. But somewhere near the kitchen doorway, half hidden behind a velvet curtain, a small pair of eyes did. Sophia had wandered from her basket. Toddlers rarely stay where they're told, and was standing quietly, watching the woman in the shimmering blue dress with unusual intensity. Something about her made Sophia's tiny hands grip her rabbit tighter. Something about her felt wrong. But what Sophia did next would leave the entire mansion frozen in silence. Marisol found her daughter minutes later, standing dangerously close to the ballroom entrance, staring at Camille with an expression far too serious for a 3-year-old. "Sophia," Marisol whispered urgently, scooping her up. "What did I say? You have to stay hidden, baby." Sophia didn't cry, didn't protest. She simply stared over her mother's shoulder at Camille, who was now laughing charmingly at something a guest had said. "She's lying," Sophia whispered. Marisol froze. "What?" "The lady in blue. She's lying. Like always." A shiver ran down Marisol's spine. She carried Sophia quickly back toward the kitchen, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone might have heard. Nobody had except one person. Ethan Whitmore had stepped away from the crowd for air, wandering toward the hallway near the kitchen, loosening his tie, trying to escape the suffocating noise of forced laughter. He caught only the tail end of the exchange between mother and daughter, but one phrase lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. "She's lying. Like always." He told himself it was nothing. A child's imagination. Toddler said strange things. That's what made them endearing. But something about the certainty in that tiny voice unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He found himself lingering near the kitchen doorway, watching as Marisol tried to soothe her daughter with quiet Spanish lullabies. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. Marisol startled, nearly dropping the tray in her hands. "Mr. Whitmore. I'm so sorry, sir, she wasn't supposed to be out here. It's fine," Ethan said, raising a hand. "She's not bothering anyone." He crouched slightly, meeting Sophia's eyes at her level, something none of his wealthy guests would ever think to do with a servant's child. "Hi there," he said softly. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she said simply, studying him the way she studied everyone, as if reading something beneath his skin. "That's a beautiful name." Ethan smiled, though exhaustion lived behind his eyes. "How old are you, Sophia?" She held up 3 fingers proudly. Despite everything weighing on his chest that night, the anniversary of his wife's death disguised as a charity gala, the whispers he still heard in his own home at 3 a.m., the unbearable loneliness of being surrounded by 200 people who didn't actually care about him. Something about this small, solemn child made Ethan's shoulders relax, if only for a moment. "She's a good girl," Marisol said quickly, protectively. "Very quiet. She won't cause trouble." "I'm not worried about trouble," Ethan said. Then, almost involuntarily, he asked, "Sophia, you said someone was lying. Who were you talking about?" Marisol's face drained of color. "Sir, she's just a child, she doesn't understand." "It's all right," Ethan said gently. "I just want to know." Sophia looked up at him with an unnerving calm. "The lady with your ring," she said. "She knows where your wife's ring went." The kitchen went silent except for the distant hum of the party. Ethan's chest tightened. His late wife's wedding ring, a family heirloom passed down for 3 generations, had gone missing the night of her accident. Police had assumed it was lost at the scene, perhaps thrown from the wreckage. He had grieved it as another casualty of that terrible night, one more piece of her he'd never get back. "Sophia," he said carefully, crouching lower, "how do you know about the ring?" The toddler shrugged with the innocent nonchalance only children possess. "She talks about it. In her sleep. When she stays here." Marisol grabbed her daughter quickly. "Mr. Whitmore, I am so sorry. Children make things up, please don't." "Marisol." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not angry. I just need to understand." He looked back at Sophia, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Sophia," he asked slowly, "have you seen the lady in the blue dress here before?" "At night." Sophia nodded matter-of-factly. "She comes when everyone's asleep. She goes to the room with the big mirror. She talks to herself about the necklace and the ring." Ethan's hands went cold. The room with the big mirror was his late wife's private dressing room, a room he had locked and hadn't entered in over a year. A room only he, his housekeeper, and Camille had keys to. But the next thing Sophia said would completely shatter everything Ethan believed about the woman he was about to marry. "She hides things in the wall," Sophia continued, her small fingers tightening around her rabbit. "Behind the mirror. There's a hole." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "A hole? Behind the mirror?" Sophia nodded again, as though this were the most ordinary information in the world. "She puts a box there. A shiny box." Marisol looked utterly bewildered. "Sir, I swear, I never told her anything about that room. I don't even know what she's talking about." "I believe you," Ethan said quietly, though his mind was spiraling. He hadn't told anyone about the small hollow space behind his late wife's antique mirror, a compartment his wife herself had shown him years ago, laughing as she called it her secret jewelry safe. Only 2 people alive knew it existed. Himself and Camille, who had helped him plan the room's renovation after the funeral. Camille had access. Camille had motive, if the rumors about his wife's suspicious accident held even a grain of truth. And now, a 3-year-old who had never set foot in that locked room was describing its secrets with impossible accuracy. Didn't make sense. Unless Sophia had actually seen something. Not supernaturally. Not through some unexplainable gift. Physically. With her own eyes. "Marisol," Ethan said carefully, "does Sophia ever wander the halls at night? When you're working late shifts?" Marisol's face went pale with shame. Sometimes she can't sleep in the staff quarters. She gets scared alone. I let her walk with me while I do the late cleaning rounds." "I know I shouldn't, sir. Please don't let this cost me my job." "Marisol," Ethan interrupted gently. "You're not in trouble. I need you to think carefully. Has Sophia ever been near the West Wing at night? Near my late wife's old dressing room?" Marisol hesitated, then nodded slowly. Sometimes I clean that hallway. She waits outside the door for me. I never let her inside, sir, I promise." "But the door has a gap at the bottom," Ethan murmured almost to himself. "A child could see through it. Or hear through it." Sophia, watching the adults with quiet patience, suddenly spoke again. "She cried there once," she said softly. "The lady in blue. She said, 'I'm sorry but I needed it.' Then she put the box behind the mirror and left." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Ethan's mind raced back through months of small, dismissed details. Camille's sudden insistence on redecorating the West Wing that he'd refused. Her strange visits to the house on nights he was traveling for business. The way she always seemed to know things about his late wife's belongings that she shouldn't. He had chalked it up to grief, to closeness, to her trying to help him heal. Now, standing in a servant's kitchen listening to a 3-year-old describe secrets no outsider should know, a horrifying possibility began forming in his mind. What if his wife's death hadn't been a simple accident? What if someone very close to him had been hiding something in that house for over a year? Something that could finally explain the questions the police had too quickly abandoned. "Sophia," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "Can you show me? Can you show me the room with the mirror?" Marisol grabbed his sleeve suddenly. "Sir, please. This is what I think it is, be careful. That woman, she's not who she pretends to be. I've felt it since the day she moved in. The way she looks at people when she thinks no one's watching." Ethan met her eyes. For the first time all evening, he saw something real, something unguarded. A mother's protective fear intertwined with a warning she'd been too afraid to voice until now. "Show me," he said quietly. "Please." But what they found behind that mirror would confirm every nightmare Ethan had refused to believe. Leaving the party unnoticed took careful timing. Ethan quietly informed his assistant he needed 10 minutes, slipping away through the servants' corridor with Marisol and Sophia trailing behind him. An unlikely trio moving through marble hallways meant for guests dressed in silk, not staff uniforms and toddler pajamas. The West Wing was dark, save for moonlight spilling through tall windows. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he unlocked the door to his late wife's dressing room for the first time in over a year. The air inside smelled faintly of old perfume and dust, untouched, frozen in time exactly as she had left it. Sophia pointed confidently toward the large antique mirror mounted against the far wall. "There," she said. "Behind it." Ethan approached slowly, his heart hammering. He remembered now. His wife had shown him this exact spot years ago, laughing as she demonstrated how the mirror's frame could swing outward slightly, revealing a shallow hidden compartment behind it. With trembling hands, he pressed the small latch hidden beneath the frame's ornate carving. The mirror swung open with a soft creak. Inside sat a small velvet box. Ethan's breath caught. He lifted it carefully, his fingers numb. Inside, nestled against faded fabric, was his late wife's wedding ring, the very ring police had assumed lost forever in the wreckage. But that wasn't all. Beneath the ring lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed slightly with age. Ethan unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a letter, written in his late wife's handwriting. "If you're reading this, something happened to me that I couldn't explain while I was alive. I've suspected for months that Camille has been going through my things, taking small pieces of jewelry, claiming they were cleaned or stored safely. I confronted her last week. She denied everything, but I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. If anything ever happens to me, please look closer at her. I don't want to believe she's capable of something terrible. But I'm scared, Ethan. Please protect yourself." The letter slipped from Ethan's fingers, drifting silently to the floor. His wife had known. She had been afraid. And months later she was dead. In an accident police had closed within days, despite unanswered questions about brake failure that had never quite made sense to anyone who truly knew her cautious driving habits. "Sir," Marisol whispered, watching the color drain completely from his face. "Are you all right?" Ethan couldn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was barely audible. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew, and I didn't listen. I thought it was just normal jealousy, grief talking. I never imagined." He stopped himself, unable to finish the thought aloud. Behind him, small footsteps padded closer. Sophia looked up at him with those solemn ancient eyes that seemed far too wise for a 3-year-old. "The lady in blue is scared of you finding out," she said simply. "That's why she smiles so much. So you don't look too close." Ethan knelt slowly, staring at this tiny child who had somehow, through nothing but quiet observation and an unusually perceptive heart, uncovered a truth that adults, trained investigators even, had completely missed. "Thank you, Sophia," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You may have just saved my life." From somewhere down the hallway, faint and getting closer, came the click of heels against marble. Camille was coming to find him. But what happened when Camille found them in that room would expose everything. "Ethan. Darling, are you in here?" Camille's voice echoed down the hallway, sweet and melodic as always. Marisol grabbed Sophia instinctively, pulling her behind her skirts, fear flooding her expression. Ethan quickly slipped the velvet box and letter into his jacket pocket, his jaw tightening as he stepped toward the doorway just as Camille rounded the corner. She froze the instant she saw him standing in the dressing room, the one room in the house she clearly hadn't expected him to enter tonight, of all nights. "Ethan," she said, her smile faltering slightly. "What are you doing in here? I thought this room was locked." "It was," Ethan said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "I unlocked it." Camille's gaze flicked briefly to Marisol and Sophia standing near the mirror, and something shifted behind her eyes. Something calculating, something afraid. "Why is the help in here?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "This isn't appropriate, Ethan. It's a private family space." "Funny," Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm. "You seem to know an awful lot about what's appropriate for this room, considering you've been visiting it yourself. At night, when you thought no one was watching." Camille's confident mask cracked, just slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The hidden compartment behind the mirror," Ethan said, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. "The one only my wife and I knew about. Funny how her ring ended up back inside it, after everyone assumed it was lost in the accident." Camille's face went pale. "Ethan, I can explain." "Can you?" His voice cracked, grief and fury tangled together. "Can you explain why my wife wrote a letter suspecting you were stealing from her, weeks before she died in an accident nobody could fully explain? Can you explain why you've spent the last year making sure I never asked too many questions?" "It's not what you think," Camille said quickly, her composure crumbling entirely now. "I never wanted her hurt, I swear. I only took a few pieces, small things. She had so much and I—" "She's dead, Camille," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "My wife is dead, and you're standing here worried about explaining jewelry." Tears filled Camille's eyes, though whether from guilt or fear of consequences, Ethan could no longer tell. "I loved you," she whispered. "Everything with us was real, Ethan, please believe that." "Was it?" Ethan's voice was hollow. "Or was I just convenient? A grieving billionaire, easy to manipulate, easy to marry into everything she left behind?" Camille had no answer. From behind Marisol's protective embrace, Sophia's small voice broke the tense silence. "She's crying because she got caught," the toddler said simply, matter-of-factly. "Not because she's sorry." The truth in those innocent words landed harder than any accusation Ethan could have made himself, because he realized in that moment that Sophia was right. Camille's tears weren't for his wife. They weren't even for him. They were for herself, for the wealth, the lifestyle, the engagement ring on her finger that she was about to lose. Ethan turned away from her, unable to look at her a moment longer. "Security!" he called quietly into his phone. "Please escort Ms. Otero from the premises. And call my lawyer. Tonight." But what happened after Camille was escorted from the mansion would change Ethan's life, and Sophia's, forever. The gala ended in confused whispers as guests noticed the sudden absence of the hostess-to-be and the pale, shaken expression on their billionaire host's face. Rumors would spread by morning, as they always did in circles like this. But Ethan no longer cared about appearances. For the first time in over a year, he felt something close to clarity. Detectives were called that same week. The letter, combined with financial records later uncovered by forensic accountants, revealed a pattern far more disturbing than simple theft. Small, deliberate acts of sabotage Camille had orchestrated over months, motivated by growing desperation to secure Ethan's fortune before his suspicious wife could expose her. The original accident investigation was reopened. What detectives found this time, with fresh eyes and a reason to look closer, finally gave Ethan the answers, and the justice he'd been denied for over a year. None of it undid his loss. But it gave him something grief alone never could. 2 weeks later, Ethan found himself once again in the mansion's kitchen, not as the distant, exhausted billionaire wandering through his own home like a stranger, but as a man beginning, slowly, to heal. Marisol was preparing dinner for the staff when he walked in, Sophia trailing behind him, her small hand wrapped trustingly around his fingers. Somewhere over the past 2 weeks, an unlikely bond had formed between the grieving billionaire and the quiet toddler who had unknowingly saved him. "Mr. Whitmore," Marisol said, surprised. "Is everything all right? Do you need something?" "Actually," Ethan said, a small, genuine smile forming for the first time in longer than he could remember. "I wanted to ask you something." Marisol wiped her hands nervously on her apron. "Of course, sir." "I've been thinking," Ethan continued, "about what this house needs. It's been empty of real warmth for a long time. Sophia." He looked down at the little girl, who gazed back up at him with those same solemn, knowing eyes. "She reminded me what honesty feels like. What it feels like when someone sees you clearly, without pretense, without agenda." He crouched down to Sophia's level, the way he had that first night. "I'd like to set up an education fund for you, Sophia. For your whole future, school, university, whatever you dream of becoming. And Marisol," he added, looking up, "I'd like to promote you. Head of household staff, with a salary that actually reflects everything you do here. You'd have your own private quarters. Sophia would never have to hide in a laundry basket again." Marisol's eyes filled with tears. Her hand pressed to her chest in disbelief. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan said softly. "You and Sophia gave me back the truth I was too afraid to look for myself. The least I can do is give you both a future worth having." Sophia, still holding her one-eared rabbit, looked up at Ethan with a small, rare smile, the first real smile anyone in that house had seen from her. "You're not sad anymore," she said simply. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "No," he whispered. "Not anymore. Thanks to you." In the months that followed, the Whitmore mansion slowly transformed from a cold, echoing monument to grief into something resembling an actual home again, filled with Sophia's quiet laughter, Marisol's warmth, and a billionaire who had finally, painfully, learned that the people society taught him to overlook were often the ones capable of seeing the clearest truths of all. Because sometimes it isn't wealth, status, or power that saves us. Sometimes it's a 3-year-old with a missing-eared rabbit and an unshakable honesty the whole world could learn from. If this story touched your heart tonight, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what part moved you the most, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional story. Thank you for staying till the end. We'll see you in the next one.